Welcome to The Tripod, the official podcast of San Clemente High School. I'm your host, Jay Bish. Today we'll be chatting with two current students and one alum. We'll start with noted adrenaline junkie Pierce Letwin.
I like to put myself in uncomfortable situations, which I feel like that's been like the most important thing to me, like to being able to grow.
And then we'll talk musicals and spending the next 4 years abroad with Brooklyn Enriquez.
Since I wanted to study set design, that's something that, movies are going to be set all over the world. And it would be good if I actually experienced different cultures and met people and saw all sorts of architecture for myself.
Finally, we'll finish it off with alum Liam Mills, who, after graduating in 2015, has been on the coolest roller coaster ride of all time.
But a big part that helped me is I kind of entered the conversation with open hands and an open mind, saying, I went to school for this, but I don't know anything, and I want to learn.
But Pierce is up first. Let's go nuts. Pierce is one of the reasons I love teaching sophomores and seniors. Since he was in my English 2 class, he's grown into a really articulate guy with a thirst for life and its unanswered questions. Let me just set this up for people that can't see this. You're off Ortega, correct?
Yes.
You're standing on this small little ledge.
Yes.
Which when I saw it, I was like, okay, cool, cliff jumping. Then you do a front flip into what looked like a little kiddie pool. Next video, a backflip into the same spot. When you're in the midst of those adventures, are you worried about abandoning your family and friends? Do you think at all about death?
Well, yes, I definitely do think about it, but there's a part of me that I'll go into a situation and I'll normally be the first one to try something out to see how it goes with the group of friends that I'm with. And most of the stuff I'm kind of drawn to doing stuff like that in a sense, because I love the adrenaline rush. I love the thrill. And I'd say if something's too sketchy, I might pull away from it. But most of the time, to me, it's just my first thought is, oh, it's fun.
So when you look at that small little, it's not even a pool. It's maybe a little lagoon or something. When you look at that, what are you thinking about?
How I'm going to jump, where I'm going to land, how deep is the pool? We check that out. Where am I jumping from? All kind of stuff like that.
Because I think what's crazy about that video is you obviously have some springs in your legs. If you were to jump, and it was funny because, your friends are reacting to it as you're doing it and you hear them blown away almost, or surprised or whatever. Because really, if you had sprung, especially that one with your front flip,
mm-hmm.
If you had sprung a little bit further, you're pretty close to that, you know what I mean? You're going, your back is landing on the rocks. It's a pretty, maybe a fatal kind of a thing. Does that enter your brain at all? That I could die here? Or are you pretty confident in your abilities and your wherewithal that it's just going to work out somehow?
I was pretty confident that I was able to handle it, but there definitely was there's a possibility that if I don't do something right, then yes, it could end up bad. And the scary part was we got to the beginning of the trail and it's about a 2.5, 3-hour hike to that spot.
Crazy.
And we were thinking oh, if something happens, someone's going to have to take a phone and run back, or we were trying to figure out if something bad happened like that, how the scenario would turn out.
Oh, so you all did talk about it. You all had thought about that. Hey, if this goes sideways, this is how we're going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Because it's not like you're just next to your cars and whatever. That's still 3 miles one way or whatever, and then getting someone to come out there and then coming 3 miles back. That's just,
Mm-hmm.
So does it enter your head at all where you're kind of maybe if my dad catches wind, does that enter your, or is it mainly just kind of you just are just thinking about the good time and hey, this could go bad, but I'm pretty confident. Does your dad enter this at all? Does any of that kind of come to mind, or?
They definitely do. I guess I think more afterwards it really settles with me. Before, yeah, I'm thinking about it. I'm concerned, like, but I don't. I test the area, the situation. How, like, I do spend some time thinking about the consequences that could happen.
Mhm.
And once it's normally like fully thought out, then I guess I'll try it. But there's been some times where it's like, oh, this looks like a ton of fun, but it's too risky. So I've backed off of some of those.
So what is too sketch for you? You mentioned that earlier. Like, what would be an example of something that either you've seen before and didn't want to try, or like anything you can think of in your head that you think, no, that's crossing the line.
Um, I don't know. I think, hmm, probably, I don't know if it was freshman or sophomore year, but definitely when I was a little less mature
Mhm.
and more stupid, I would say. I was with some friends and we were, I think we found a way onto the top of the outlets building,
Mhm.
and there was still like construction stuff going on, and there's like a cool little spot that we saw from across, and it was like the only way to get across was to like jump over um like two sections. And I was looking at it and it was like it looks pretty far, and it just rained maybe like a couple days or like the day before,
Uh,
and it was looking a little slippery, and I was like that would be fun to get over there, but I was like there are so many things. It's like a far jump. I could slip. There's a lot of things that could have gone wrong, so we stayed away from it.
That's cool. Where does this like interest in the extreme stem from?
I don't know. I've always been kind of like an adventurous person, I would say. I like not being face to face with death, but like just being out there, if that makes sense. I just like the feeling, like the adrenaline rush, like I said earlier. It's always a good feeling for me. I love doing like just things that intrigue other people that maybe they wouldn't do.
What does that look like to you when you are sort of staring at the possibility of dying in a situation like that? Like, what does that look like? What does it feel like when you're navigating that territory?
I could kind of say this right now, but I'm not too afraid of death. I'm not like it doesn't scare me as much as it probably it does other people.
Mhm.
But I do look at like how the scenario would turn out more if something were to happen.
Mhm.
Um, but other than that, I don't know. It kind of thrills me a little bit.
Why doesn't it scare you?
Why doesn't it?
Yeah, why doesn't the idea of death scare you?
I've put in some thought to it, maybe like every once in a while, but I've never really sat down with myself and like a full discussion on why it doesn't. But I, as we talked before, like I've gone to church a while with my family and all that, and there's some things that I do believe in the Bible, and there's some things that just question me a lot.
Mhm.
And I think I'm satisfied with my faith enough that I can trust in like God per se
Mhm.
to just like I don't know how to really put this, but it's not something that really scares me.
That's cool. I feel like you're able to live a lot more freely without that, right? Because I think if you're someone who's always afraid of death, you have that buffer, and that, serious question always comes up whenever you're doing anything. And for you, it's like obviously you've been able to have some really cool experiences just because of the fact that you don't really consider that to be this giant hurdle
Hmm.
in your thinking, which is awesome. We
Hmm.
were talking earlier about how I've had you in class since you were a sophomore. What do you think has been, because I think this is what's kind of cool is like when you were a sophomore, I remember first, second day of school, you told us all about how you're colorblind, and like that was a big thing because we were all like, dude, what color is this? And it was just this thing everyone was kind of astonished by. But then after that, I remember you're pretty quiet in class. And then now we fast forward to senior year. I remember I saw you in the halls last year. Hey, Pierce, like, all that kind of stuff. But then we come in here this year, and I feel like you are a brand new dude. We'll get to the documentary in a little bit that you made, but like, what do you think for you has been or like a noticeable shift for you since your sophomore year to your senior year?
Um, I can definitely say I've matured a lot more. I play with the surroundings that I'm in. I like to see where I fit in, where I don't, in a sense. And like we've discussed, I like to put myself in uncomfortable situations, which I feel like that's been like the most important thing to me, like to being able to grow. Um, just knowing how you deal with like different situations. Like you could be in the corner full of people you've never met before, but they're all friends and you're the only outlier. And I like putting myself in those situations to try to become more friendly with those people, see how I handle myself. And definitely another thing I would say is the friends I'm with. It's not like you choose this one group of friends and they're doing the same thing their entire life for the entire high school career. But like with the friends that I have, that I love the most about them is that they're maturing with me, and we're all growing up in a sense, looking at like the real world, what's going to happen after that, instead of staying in the past. So I think that's definitely been like a huge benefactor to helping me like mold into the person that I'm becoming.
That's awesome. I know when we were talking in class the other day, you were talking about that same kind of thing, how you and the guys with whom you're friends with, like they, you've all kind of been growing together. So when do you think that changed where you started thinking about and examining the future versus being stuck in the past?
I would say it had to be throughout junior year. Just looking at the scenario, freshman, sophomore year was more of like playing and all that. It was like we were still trying to understand like how high school was going to work. We still felt like little kids. Um, but I think junior year was probably the big deal because it's so close to senior year, and when we looked at it, we're like, oh, we're almost seniors. But then we looked at that after that, like what's going to happen to us after seniors? We're graduating, we're going to college, we're majoring in something, we're getting our own job, we're starting our own life, and all that stuff. So I think when you look at like, if I was to look at that as freshmen, I'd be like, oh, we're almost sophomores, and then we're almost juniors, and it flies by super fast. And I think just the kick in the butt as a junior helped kickstart the whole thing.
So where do you think you're going?
Uh, to college.
Or just like in the future, like when you start to think about the present and how that might line up with anything in the future, like where do you see yourself once you graduate?
Well, I did apply for Air Force and a couple of other colleges. I've gotten into West Virginia and Colorado State. Air Force, I need to take my medical exam, but I've been getting like emails and stuff saying you have a very high chance of getting in, which is kind of cool in some sense. But I think I know I'm definitely going to college. I want to go to college after this. Um, I want to start the next journey kind of my life, and figuring out where I want to go. That's probably the main obstacle that I have in front of me right now. But once I do that, I want to stick with college. I want to get a good job. I want to start a family, and so on and so forth. But stuff like that.
Are you a guy that is going to want to work like a ton of crazy hours to set yourself up like with a lot of money? Are you the kind of guy that wants to have a nice work-life balance where you're able to work a job that is meaningful to you, but you have time for the family side of it and your friends and so like where does that all how does that add up to you, that equation?
Um, I think I'm not fully matured. I can say that right now, but I think as I do fit more into that body, I think I'll start realizing that like I probably want to set myself up and the family that I will start up for greatness. And I think I'll have a lot of life. I can't say that, but I don't know for sure. But I think I'll probably start with a lot of hours at first, get the money, and then retire whenever I can. And then I have the rest of my life, however long that may be, to chill out.
Cool. That's awesome, dude. Well, one thing I want to kind of get to with this was that happiness documentary that you made, which again, I think was the origins of it was really cool because it really stemmed from you coming over, coming over to my desk and and just wanting to chat about this topic. And it was really cool. And I know you've got a lot of good feedback on it from everyone, from your friends to Adele to, um, and the whole idea of it, just to give some context here, you were going around and trying to examine happiness and essentially what it is for certain people. What was the initial inspiration behind wanting to document that?
I think the initial inspiration was the video, the documentary that you showed, the loneliness one.
Okay.
And I thought that was an extremely cool idea, asking people like, do they think if they're lonely or not, and the reasons behind why they do. And I was like, what's another topic that could almost be more powerful than that most people probably think that they are, or they are having a really hard time trying to find it. So that's what I chose, was the happiness, just because it kind of fit within those boundaries.
That's cool. How would you define it personally?
I would, let's see, I would define happiness, not worried about anybody else. You're content with, not content, but you love the life that you're living. You love everything that you do. There's no grudges or anything holding you back from doing what you want to do. Um, I I think it's a lifestyle more than anything, because it really, just that single topic can affect people on like a whole different level.
Is that your current lifestyle? Would you say that you're a happy person in these days? You're content with that kind of stuff, or are you still? Is that still a path that you're walking that you're hoping to achieve at some point?
I would say I'm still struggling with it. There's definitely stuff that's just holding me back. There's things that are not going my way right now, but I'm definitely searching for it, and I think I'm on the right path to being able to find it, but it's not here at the moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure, dude. I think that's a really mature thing to say because I think you hear a lot of people that say, "Oh yeah, like I'm totally happy, like I'm a really happy guy with whatever," and then you ask them why, and they can't really line up any reasons for it. They just think that they want to front that they're happy because that they should be happy or whatever else. So I think it's really cool to hear that you're not someone that feels like you have to do that. Obviously, I know that you're not like that. What did you learn in the process? I mean, you interviewed friends of yours, you interviewed some of our staff here, you interviewed one of the guys on Del Mar that lives down there. Like, so what, I mean, what did you pull away from those conversations?
I think everybody has their own definition of happiness. No one's really exactly the same, and they all find happiness in different things like hobbies. And the one thing that I found that really interested me was the age group, like what they focused on. Like, I interviewed a one of my neighbors, and I don't know how old he is, but he's pretty young, and he found happiness in just like materialistic things. Like, he loved surfing, he loved skating, he loved doing all this stuff like toys and all that. And then once you get kind of to the older group, they find happiness more in like an emotional way, like love the people they're surrounded with and like all that stuff.
That's awesome, dude. Did anything surprise you about that? Anything that anybody said or anything that kind of manifested through those conversations? Anything that surprised you throughout the process of making it?
I think one thing that definitely did surprise me was the man that I interviewed on Del Mar. So he is a homeless man, and he said he's been homeless for around 8 or 9 years.
Mhm.
And the one thing that really like caught my attention is that he seemed extremely happy. Like, he had nothing holding him back, and it surprised me that the fact, like, his living condition, I thought like normally people like that would normally be kind of sad trying to work their way up, but now he had a smile on his face the entire time. And it kind of it kind of influenced me to like try to live in that sense, live that way. Just don't have things hold you back, and just shoot for the best.
It was really cool to see him, especially because he had so much life to him. You know, when you watch that documentary and you see everybody else that's being interviewed, they come across as a lot more passive people because they're just standing there, sitting there, or whatever. But I remember the way that he was moving, like he just, it was almost like the life that was in him was bigger than his body, you know? And so I love that you saw that in him, because I totally agree with you on that front for sure. Last thing I want to get to, you guys have had obviously a really, really difficult year in school. But of late, you guys have had some really cool things go down. You had club football season that happened earlier in 2021. What was that like?
I think it was a really cool experience just because it wasn't necessarily connected to the high school. And at that point in time, we all thought we were not going to be having a high school season, like not at all.
Yeah.
And I think it was really cool for the people that were selected for that. They got like their last farewell to like the sport, because obviously all the seniors that have stuck with it all 4 years, they love the sport. That's why they stuck with it. And I think it's cool to see all the people put their passion into something, even though it's not necessarily part of a bigger thing. It's just they're able to go out, play the sport, they're able to finish the season. And I think that was the coolest experience, just being surrounded by, like I say, brothers, all loving the same thing.
That's awesome. And then you guys are going to be starting up. You guys have a game, isn't it? Like what, next Friday?
I think it could be. Yeah, this would be our last week of practice, and the next Friday after that.
Because you got to have 2 weeks of practice, and then once that's up, so the 19th is supposedly. So are you excited for the prospect of actually having a high school football season? How does that whole thing work on the tail of or in the wake of the club season? Like, how, you know?
I'm excited, honestly. I don't know about the other people, but they seem excited, but for me, yes, I definitely am, just because it means a lot more just being on your home field in front of the lights on Friday night, playing for your school. And it's always a cool experience being able to go to the games. Just recent years, I was on the sideline watching, or I was even in the stands, and it's always a cool experience just to be there. But playing on the field is just a whole different thing. It just makes it more lively, and everybody gets like I don't know, like an extra boost, and it's cool to see the whole team come together just for one thing.
That's awesome, dude. Well, I think it's gonna be really neat for our school, for our student athletes to have these sports come back to finish the year that has been unique. But I'm pumped that you guys are excited about it. It's gonna be fun for everyone to take in and have a chance to play. And that's awesome, dude. Thanks a bunch for joining me today. And it's been an honor, like, to get to know you throughout the last few years, but especially this year, because you were just a whole different dude. And it just makes me so excited, because I feel like you meet a lot of kids in high school that, you know, unfortunately you see some of them and you're like, oh man, they're peaking right now. Like, this is their peak years. And for you are so far away from that, because your willingness to grow, your willingness just to learn and not get complacent by anything is just going to take you a super long ways. So I'm excited to follow your journey. I'm excited that you're on here, and excited to know you, dude. So thanks, Pierce, for coming in, and appreciate all your thoughts. Since wandering onto campus, Brooklyn has experienced a lot. And after graduation, she's going abroad to continue her education. Her love for the stage has taken her overseas, and I couldn't be more thrilled. Here's our chat. I think you and I this year, it's been cool to talk about like our shared interest in musicals and so on and so forth. Do you have an experience of yours that led to like musicals clicking for you? Do you remember when that all kind of transpired?
Yeah, I actually have the ticket. This is it. It's like when I saw Mary Poppins in 2006 at the Alum. It was just like something my grandma took me to see because I liked Mary Poppins the movie.
Mhm.
So she's like, oh, maybe you'll like to see it live and stuff. And then I saw it and I thought it was really cool that they were able to make Mary Poppins fly like on stage. Like that seems so magical. So I really liked it. And then she noticed that I was kind of into it. So she just took me to see like Annie and The Lion King and Wicked. And then after those, I loved them so much. And then when Hamilton came out and like I was in 7th grade, I was obsessed with it. I like knew every lyric to every song. And my mom, like it was before Hamilton was popular. She's like, what the heck are you singing? Like what is that? And I don't know. Hamilton's like kind of I feel like what gets a lot of people into musical theater, and that's just kind of what like took my obsession to the extreme.
Mhm.
So I think I've always liked it, but then after Hamilton, that was like my whole obsession.
What is it about that format that connects with you?
Which like Hamilton?
Well, just like just the musical, like the
Oh,
ideology behind musicals.
I don't know. I really like the. It's so weird, but I love like ensemble. Like I really like the sound of everybody's voice singing together. It's
Mhm.
just like it's really moving. I don't know how to explain it, but like all my favorite songs from musicals are like the ones where everybody's singing together. Just like it's like really powerful, and then when you're there in person, it feels really different. And I can't sing, so I think it's like the coolest thing ever that people are so talented like that.
That's cool. I'm in the same
Yeah.
boat. No, I think it's because I grew up in a time where people weren't like, musicians that I follow were not good singers, and so I thought it was always cool to go to theater because they were really good at that. And like you said, like the magic that was taking place on stage of Mary Poppins flying somehow, like just all those things coming together, I felt like just always blew me away. So you said that Hamilton was a big thing for you early on. What was it that triggered that for you before it became this trendy show?
I listened to like I was on YouTube and I just like saw this like cover of a girl singing Burn.
Uh,
And I was like, wow, this song is really good. Like it's really catchy. And then I looked it up to see what it was from and it said it was from Hamilton. So I started listening to it and I was like, whoa, these songs are really catchy. Like I like that it was rap. I mean, it's not maybe like if I said that to a rap person, they'd probably be offended. But it's like rap to me, and I thought that was it was super fun. Uh, and then it made history really fun too. And so and like with it, the whole thing is sung, so that was pretty fun. Like I don't know how to explain it. I just really liked every like the way it sound.
Okay, cool. And so you said that 7th grade was the time where you kind of got into, or that was at least when Hamilton came out. So you were how old when you got into like the Mary Poppins stuff?
I was 6.
Okay, cool. So then like, did you do drama or stuff like that on the side before high school or no?
No, I didn't even start drama in high school till junior year.
So how did that come to be? Like what made you want to get up and become involved with drama here at the school?
I always wanted to since freshman year, since I really liked musicals at that point, but I was on the tennis team and it was just like too big of a schedule conflict
Mhm.
to do both at the same time. And then after sophomore year, like the team was just like it wasn't fun anymore. And I used to love tennis like so much. And I still do. I love to watch it and play and stuff, but just the environment wasn't really something I liked. And I told my parents that I was like, oh, I don't know, drama sounds more fun. I've always wanted to do it. But that means like I'd be quitting tennis. And they said, well, it's really up to you. They said, like, you could probably go somewhere with college in tennis. Just know that you're giving that up. And I said, but I don't know. I think that I'd rather do something that made me happier. So I joined drama, and that was like the best decision ever. It makes everything so much more fun.
What's that? I think we on campus, I think we have these different worlds, obviously with, the arts and drama and music, we got the sports, stuff like that. So can you take us into that world of drama on campus? Like what's the vibe? Like what's it like to be a part of that?
It's really supportive. Like everyone's just friends with each other. Like the like day I walked into the first table read, everyone just was so nice to me, and I was wearing a Ben Platt shirt, and they like all swarmed me like, oh my god, Ben Platt, I love him. And then some of the actors, won't name who, just started singing it spontaneously, like his songs. I'm like, okay, please don't do that. But it was for me, it was really cool because I love to just like reference musicals and everything. No one ever understood what I was talking about. So then when I joined drama, it's like everyone there is also obsessed with musicals. So it's people with like a shared interest, and no one thinks you're weird if you just quote different shows.
Well,
But everyone's super nice there.
It's what, everyone's synchronized?
No, everyone's super nice.
Oh, super nice.
Everyone's so friendly. Everyone tries to be your friend when you're there. So
How does that aid your guys' productions? That kind of vibe of everyone being supportive and super, does that have a positive effect, you think, on the shows you?
Yeah, I think it makes things less stressful because I know that sometimes, like when you're doing tech in a show and things go wrong, it could just be fun. Like it could be bad, but we like kind of just laugh it off and everyone's friends. No one's like really getting too mad at each other just because it's like no one really hates each other there. It's a friendly environment. So I think that makes things less stressful because I know that for Shrek, a lot of things went wrong, but instead of just freaking out and people yelling at each other about it, we just laughed.
For sure. And I know with COVID, you've had to get kind of creative with how you've done things. Can you kind of take us through that? Like, how has COVID sort of reshaped drama for you guys in the last year?
Well, when COVID first happened, like we had to stop Music Man, which really was really sad because we were only a month away from opening day. So that show just didn't happen at all. And then we thought we would be back for obviously we thought like school was going to be regular and stuff. So they were planning on doing Footloose, I think that was the musical, which I'm kind of happy that COVID stayed because I hate Footloose so much. I did not want to do that. So then they just decided to do one acts and we recorded them, like we filmed them and just put them on the internet and stuff. That was the only way to really be able to share some sort of thing with the families. And it was not that fun for crew. We had to tell all the newcomers in crew that, you'll actually do something eventually. Some of them didn't even want to stick around because for one act, there's really not much to do because you're not putting on a full-blown show. But I guess it was better than nothing, especially for the actors. They still got to have fun. And it made things a little bit more normal than just not doing anything at all. But then now we decided to do an outdoor production of Les Mis. So we're going to be building an outdoor theater up on Upper Campus. And I feel like that was really creative to know, like they just looked at the guidelines and since we can't sing indoors, we could bring outdoors. And it's going to be in May. So the weather's probably going to be really pretty then. And I think that's really fun and creative.
That's super cool. You mentioned doing crew on Les Mis. Are you doing stage? Are you the stage director?
Yeah, I'm the stage manager for that. So
what does that entail?
It's kind of like overseeing all the crews, and then I have more of a role once the show once we tech the show and once it actually starts because I'm on headset with every other lead from all the crews. So in case something goes wrong backstage, I could kind of help problem solve. I'm mostly just like a problem solver. When something goes wrong, I can fix things. But then I also help with lights. So I call the cues to change the lights. So I have like everything written down in my script. And it's mostly just, yeah, I hang out in the tower. So I'm calling cues. That's mostly what it is.
That's super cool. Well, I love you said earlier that you were going to drop tennis to do this. And your parents were like, oh, well, you can go to college with tennis and so on and so forth. But I feel like your love for drama and musicals has shaped your path post high school. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Yeah. Take us, because I love this. Like, this is one of my favorite things that I learned about you this year. Like, where are you going to college and why?
I'm going to England, so that's pretty fun. That's just like I've only been wanting to go there for like a year for college, which I kind of just made the decision spontaneously a little bit because I had always wanted to go to school in New York so I could be like by Broadway and stuff. But then I changed my mind. I thought that since I wanted to study set design, that's something that, movies are going to be set all over the world. And it would be good if I actually like experienced different cultures and met people and saw all sorts of architecture like for myself rather than just basing things off of pictures. I mean, obviously I travel in that profession, but I feel like if I'm actually just involved in different, like seeing different areas, that's going to help me with that. And then I feel like it'll make me stand out a little bit when I go to get jobs and stuff. Like most people just stay here in the US. If I show that I'm somebody who has done some really interesting things, that could be a plus for me. And I've always wanted to travel to Europe, and what better time than when your parents are willing to pay for it.
That's cool. You mentioned the set design stuff, but I know this year you've made a lot of like just you've grown so much as a director. Do you think that maybe your future could be outside of the theater like that, or do you hope to just stay within what brought you into this medium in the first place?
I think I would like to go into like making movies as well. I think that everything just kind of like evolved. Like it started with me just liking musicals and then wanting to do set for musicals, and then I kind of changed my mind with doing set for film. And then just after taking this class, I really enjoyed writing and directing and stuff. I thought it was just as a creative outlet I've never tried before, but it just felt so natural when I was doing it and I loved it, and I would like to do that it, as my future like career if I could, because it makes me happy, and if I could do something that makes me happy, that'd just be like the best thing ever.
That's an awesome goal. So where do you see yourself 5, 10 years down the road? Are you someone that likes to plan like that? Or are you kind of just fly by the seat of your pants and see what happens as you react to things? Like, what are you kind of hoping to where do you hope to be, I should say, after college in England and so on and so forth?
I mean, I don't really know if I have like a definite plan. Like I'm not saying like, oh, exactly in 5 years I want to be doing this, but like a general direction is like once I graduate, I'll try to just get myself. Honestly, I try and get myself involved in the industry like before, because I know that's like really hard. We have a family friend who's a director, and she just already told us about all the hardships that she's gone through to try to even like get herself where she is, and she's worked so hard, and I've seen like how long it took her to get to where she is. So I know that it's going to take a lot of work. I know I can't say like in 10 years I'm definitely going to be like making and writing my own movie. It would be cool if I was able to make that happen, but I'm prepared for a lot of struggles along the way.
Well, I think what's cool though about the industry and how it's evolving is, I mean, there's a lot of festivals that are always out there for independent filmmakers, and there's a lot of ways, I think, to kind of get yourself out there, especially with the internet nowadays too, that you have to wonder. I mean, because I think what I've been so impressed with you so far is this year, at least, is taking on this new format, right? Like you were really into doing the theater stuff and plays and stagecraft, all, and now here you are, you've got access to, learn how to write and shoot. And now you're turning out these films that you're making fully by yourself, and they're awesome, like just within your first less than a year of doing it. So, I mean, I think you've gotten to see what the hard work looks like as well, but you have that creative ability to put forth and articulate really cool ideas in your films. So that's the hardest part, sometimes just having that ability to be unique and different. So it'll be cool to continue to watch you down the road and see what transpires. Do you see yourself staying abroad long-term after college, or is that more of like, all right, 4 years is going to be cool and then come back stateside? Or do you just, like I said, just kind of go by the seat of your pants?
I don't know, because I've obviously never been there before, so I don't know like if I'm going to even really like it. But if I do like it, maybe I'd end up staying, especially if I found a job or something. But I would like to come back. I've always wanted to live in New York, even if that's not for a very long time. I've always wanted to do that. I feel like I'm going to have to do that eventually in my life. So I have like a reason to come back to the US. Everybody thinks that I'm going to stay in the UK, but I said no. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be coming back. I don't want to develop an accent either. That'd be bad.
Any reason why people think you're going to stay there?
They just like they said you're going to love it, because they're like, we've been there and it happened to your cousin. She said that she was only going to like visit there, and then she ended up marrying a guy there and staying there. And they said we've like a bunch of family has said like we've traveled there and we would want to stay there if we were able to. So it'll probably happen to you. And I said, I don't know. I don't know if I'd want to stay there forever. I like it here. It's kind of nice.
A true scholar athlete, Liam parted ways with football and flew up north, enrolling at the University of Oregon before eventually pitching himself to USC's film school and being accepted. If you want to be successful after graduation, check out Liam's story. I read this yesterday in a post from one of my kids who's asking for feedback, and he was talking about colleges. And he was like, oh, I can either stay local or I can go out of state. You chose to go out of state, up to Oregon. Why?
Multiple things. First of all, I think when we're in high school, we get stuck in this mindset of, and I was too, of this like rat race to who can be in the top university, who can be in the highest ranked, and that's all that seemingly mattered. I think that's a lot of like BS. Pardon my French. It's not really necessary. I overthought it a lot, and it actually caused some depression at the time of not getting into UCLA, not getting into the local California top school. And it didn't really end up mattering. Like I wouldn't redo anything that happened. I would have chose Oregon 10 times out of 10, having now gone through it. I chose that over Boulder because I could double major, which was a big part of it. I got a lot of AP and IB credits to go to Oregon. So most of my freshman year was already done by the time I got there, which allowed me to pursue film, which is what I wanted to do. And then it also allowed me to pursue the more practical law or political science precursors to going to law school. So that was the reason for going up there. And then having done so, I would highly recommend going out of state. I joined a new community full of like outdoorsy people from Portland who are very, very cool and different from the bubble you grow up in Southern California. And it was also just an adventure and a growing experience in and of itself to go out of state, completely reinvent yourself and the culture you're in. So I would highly recommend it.
Like, in what ways do you think you changed over your 4 years at Oregon? Like, how did being in a new environment, how did immersing yourself in a new culture outside of this Orange County bubble, how'd that affect you in your growth?
Not to be too cynical, but it's very, very positive in terms of like what I was influenced in and how I wanted to spend my time and people's interests. Social media is very, very big in Southern California, and especially in high school, to a point where it kind of seems like everything you do is analyzed and known, especially coming from San Clemente, which is a small town where you go to a Ralph's and you're going to see someone you know. You go to Board and Brew and you're going to see 10 people you know. So then joining an entire community of thousands of kids, and then whatever friend group you end up entering into, whether it's a few or 100, whatever it may be in college, being completely different from completely different backgrounds. And Oregon's like a mostly Oregon populated state school. So it was kind of like joining an entire new community. And then in so doing, you get the opportunity to, no one knows you. Like, it's not like you go to the Board and Brew here and everybody knows who you are or your family, et cetera. So you get the opportunity to completely say, you know what, I'm Liam Mills and I'm doing this now, or I'm super interested in film and I'm going to be spending all my time doing this on the weekend. I'm going to go camp and film and take photos, whatever, stay outdoors on the weekend. And you're not stuck with the same nickname you have in high school and things like that. It's a complete reinvention and it's completely up to you. You can stay the same or you can find a new path, whatever it may be.
That's cool, dude. We'll get to this a little bit later, but you talked about, I know right now that you're a grad student at USC for film school. Going away from LA, I think certain people think that's a pretty crazy idea because you're so close to Hollywood and so on and so forth. Was it always on your agenda to go out of state, get that experience, have a new perspective on life, and come back and go to film school as a grad student? Was that always kind of the idea that you had in mind, or that just kind of manifest out of your experiences?
A little of both. Like, since I was young, I wanted to do film, like for as long as I can remember, pretty much. I'm not really a big 5-year plan person. I'm more of each day you wake up and then your experiences and your decisions will pave the next day in front of you. So things kind of just fell into place based off of the decisions I've made. It was never really like go to Oregon, try out something new, and then come back, go to grad school. It was kind of the decisions, the people I met, who I ended up shaping into, that led me to where I am now.
So let's get into one of those experiences. When I was reading up and we were catching up a little bit,
yeah,
you go up to Oregon, you have the political sci or the poli-sci thing that you're studying. You also have the cinema stuff on the back end. And then you find yourself in Laos. Walk me through how this whole thing worked and just tell me a little bit about that experience.
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to Oregon. I grew up lucky enough to travel. So I've always had like an international mindset, or my passions involved like going to experience new places and new cultures. Partly that's because my family is international. My grandparents came from Russia on one end and they came from England on the other. So my parents were first generation, which I guess that makes me second. So I definitely had aspirations from a young age to, okay, you can go to college and now you get to study abroad. Like that was a big part of it for me. So I did that both freshman year and sophomore year, mostly because it was cheaper as an out-of-state student to go abroad for credits than it was to actually go to Oregon, which is kind of funny. So when it came to junior year, it's definitely like kind of a stressful time in the same way that junior year in high school is, of like, where am I applying? Where am I going to get in? Except on that end, it's more of you need an internship because you need to get a job. And without experience, it's very hard to get a job. It's not impossible, but most kids are stressing about getting one. And I wanted to do film. I don't really have any connections, period, in film. And it's a hard industry to get into without connections. So I kind of thought of, what do I want to do? Since I was young, it was film and international relations, poli-sci, immigration. Those were the things I was interested in learning about and acting in. And then film was like the passion, the creative outlet that I was into. And I was like, there's got to be a way to combine the two. So I reached out to a couple NGOs and people that my dad had worked with in the past that worked at the State Department in different countries around the world. And I became really fascinated with NGOs, mostly because I had like an international development course in political science that just taught about, NGO is non-governmental organization, but it's basically like a state-run organization, except a lot of them are nonprofit. And they go into developing countries and can help with water purification, or like, for example, the one I ended up interning for was sexual disease prevention, women's rights and health rights, sexual education of all kinds in terms of gender and in terms of just health. And it's called Population Services International, or Population Standards International, I think. PSI. I only ever called it PSI. But point being, I ended up reaching out to a bunch of people I found on LinkedIn, or I would look at a website for an NGO and like what their goal was, what their messaging is, what they're doing in a developing country that we in America perceive as needing help, even though that's kind of a touchy subject because often they don't, or the help doesn't exactly correlate with their culture. But I ended up reaching out to a bunch of them, asking for informational interviews, meaning I don't know what you guys exactly do, but I know that you get to live abroad with your families, spend your life helping others in developing countries that need help, whether it's access to clean water or anything I just mentioned. And I find that really interesting. Like, I would love to spend my growing years, 2 years or a year in a different country every year. You change places, and your impact on the world and on people around you is huge. So I reached out to them, trying to ask, hey, what exactly do you do? How did you get into the industry? How does it work for sustaining your own daily life, travel, etc., paying for food, your house, all that when you work for a nonprofit? And then lastly, how would I get into it? How would I get a job? What should I do? And a bunch of them kind of talked about their trajectory into those positions that they ended up being in. And one of them, we actually had a very good conversation. His name's Eric Seastedt, and he really wanted to help me. He could see that I was passionate about it and wanting to spend my summer abroad helping in any way I can. But most of the kids that work for him are grad students that have very specific things that apply to the work they were doing, aka for this PSI, it was all medical kids or pre-med or post-med that are trying to do the same thing, help people in the developing world, be not necessarily wanting to be a doctor back in the States. And he kind of came to me and he said, well, if you're going to get an internship or some type of work opportunity abroad for an NGO or whatever it may be, you're going to need to present to the potential employer something that you can provide to their business or to their NGO that is like helpful to them. AKA, they're not just going to say, oh yeah, you are passionate about this and you want to help out. Sure. Come on over. Like, need to apply something. So he's like, start thinking about that. See what you might be able to do. And just right there off the top of my head, I was like, well, yeah, I'm a poli-sci major, but I'm also double majoring in film. I know how to work a camera. I know how to edit. So I guess I could do like web design and web work in terms of digital content. And he was like, that's perfect. Like, yeah, we could definitely use something like that. All NGOs could use something like that in terms of community outreach. He's like, draft up something or a project idea that would be beneficial to us. So then I did that. And then by the next time we met, I like said, you know, if I were to specifically work for you guys or any NGO, I would come in, draft up a script or a series of short videos that would entail whatever project it might be working on. So what I ended up working on for them was sexual disease prevention and gender rights. So we came up with 22 videos in the end that all dealt with those, that were mostly like PSAs, like public service announcements to the public, that just spread their message, because a lot of people are illiterate or were never in an education system in Laos, which is the country I ended up working in. So the idea was a video could very much help, even if it's on Facebook as the platform, to just be like, hey, this is how you use a condom, which is a very like laughable thing in their culture. They're not as westernized as we are in terms of it being an accepted thing to have birth control or to have a condom, safe sex practices, basically. Sure. So it's like, if you put this on a video and explain how to use it and show that it's not funny with people from their communities as the actors, it might do some good. And he was like, that's a fantastic idea. Why don't you come out and do it? And I was like, okay. So it kind of just, when it started with, I have no idea what I'm going to do. I have no connections in film. I want to go abroad and I want to help people. So I asked people, hey, how'd you get into the industry? And then one of them told me, well, you got to give us something. Told him what I could give him. And he's like, okay, yeah, come do it.
How impressed were they with your ability as a self-starter? Because I feel like there's so much you just told in that story about how easily you stand out from the kids. Because I think you have a lot of kids that are probably just sending emails like, copy and paste this and just add in a new person every time or whatever. And here you are reaching out going, look, I don't know exactly what you do, but I want to kind of figure this out. And like, you have those conversations. I just feel like there's so much in there that makes you stand out because you're lucid in these conversations versus just putting forth this copied and pasted email to 1,000 people and hoping you get a slip. Did that ever come up in conversation? Like how impressed they were with your ability just to self-start and then add value?
Yeah. And that also, it came up when I was post-college trying to find work in COVID, graduating too, kind of had the same sort of method. And I think a lot of kids, and I know a lot of my friends that are the same age, they have this idea that you have to come across and be like, say you want to do music and it's like, oh, here's things that I can do. I'm very good at this. You should hire me because. But a big part that helped me, and I think they appreciated, and that I've been told they appreciated, is I kind of entered the conversation with open hands and an open mind, saying, I went to school for this, but I don't know anything and I want to learn. And I'm very interested to know your story. And when you're talking to somebody who's in their 50s, that's been working in their career for however long, 30 years, that's like very cool for them. Oh, this is a kid that doesn't know anything. I was in his shoes at one point. He recognizes his lack of experience but he's willing to put that out on paper and say, hey, I want to learn. And I guess you would call that humility, or not really humbleness, but just an openness to the idea that you are a starter. You're an entry level kid. You don't really know what you're doing, as opposed to being like, I know it. This is what I'm doing, you know?
Well,
So they definitely appreciated that. And I've had definitely people in those informational interviews, both for internships in college and afterward, that like that was the reason they originally responded, was my acceptance of the idea that I know nothing, but I want to learn, and the work ethic is there clearly, because I'm reaching out to you just to hear what you have to say, learn from your story. And everybody loves to tell their own story of how they got there. So it's a good intro to a conversation.
That's super cool, dude. I mean, there are a lot of those people that are like the fake it till they make it kind of things, but I think that's kind of why you stand out too. You're authentic and you're just being yourself and saying, hey, like you're showing them so much versus having to say anything, and it makes you that attractive. So the cool thing is this whole experience happened because you fell in love with film at a young age. How did that happen?
Yeah, we talked about this the other day when we were catching up, but I grew up we're in a very creative family. And both of my brothers are big time drawers, painters. We were all in arts classes growing up. My sister's also, I would say, a painter. I don't really know she's kind of diverse in her creative outlet. But for me, it was always, since I was young, going on trips or going to backpack with my dad, going camping, whatever, I wanted to hold his camera. Like I wanted to be the one taking the photos. So that started young. If there was the like art competitions in elementary school and middle school, I wanted to take a photo. Like I have pictures of like my dogs in the backyard kind of thing. Instead of writing a poem or painting something, mine was always with a camera. So that attachment was there very, very young. And then film kind of started with joke YouTube videos, being in the YouTube generation, or like the very first of Gen Z that were in it. And I copied SNL digital shorts in the street with my friends, and it was a blast. Like it was more fun than doing anything else, even though those videos are probably very laughable to look back on now. And then sometime in middle school, my parents showed me Brick by Ryan Johnson, who San Clemente alum from San Clemente. And he went to USC grad film school, or might have been undergrad, but either way, it was just a local kid who had this passion for film, as did I, who went out and made a movie in our community at our high school, got a big actor, just Gordon-Levitt, who is still in the start of his career, but definitely known, all because he had this passion to make something, not because he's the next Spielberg or anything like that. He's a local kid with this passion, no budget, made a film in our community. And it just proved like, okay, anyone can do this. Or not anyone, someone who's willing to put the work in and put their heart behind the camera or on paper and write something and then go and do it. So it became more of this attainable goal, as opposed to Spielberg or like the LeBron James of film, which is what I had viewed it as growing up, or the people who get on SNL. Like it's very, very hard to get on SNL. And then, not to say that it isn't hard to go make a film like Ryan Johnson did, and it's a fantastic film in your local community and get into SC film school in and of itself. But it just gave me this idea of like, okay, if he can do it, then I can reach for it. I can try for it. I can work hard, and maybe it's attainable. So it kind of changed the mindset, that film alone.
Sweet. So it's just all about like seeing someone that you could relate to in some way, versus like before that film was untouchable, it seemed like, until you had seen someone in your community. That's awesome, dude. So you come back from Oregon, and then walk me through, I think that's just it's a really cool story to hear, getting a job down here during COVID and then going to SC, like kind of just walk me through that again, in terms of how that came about. Cause I think it's a really neat story to hear about how you're just chasing stuff, and accomplishing goals by hard work.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand at the start with like my internship, reason, like the way I got the internship of reaching out to somebody I don't really know. And it goes back to I don't really have connections in the film world, and that's how people get jobs in the film world. So came home from college. I actually went and not studied abroad. I traveled Europe for a month or two with my friends. Came home and it's December now. I'd been graduated for 5 or so months, and it's like, okay, living with your parents, got to get a job, which everybody does. And I say, okay, I want to do film. So I research a bunch of companies, spend hours and hours. Basically, my day job was researching the type of companies I wanted to work for. And then I would find said company like Exile, which is the one I ended up working for. I would look at everything they've put out, the directors or editors that are on their company, that are signed to their company, the producers. I would figure out who's at the top, who's like mid-level, who can I reach out to in regards to the same thing of, hey, I'm Liam. I just graduated from college. I don't really have any plan or know what I'm doing, but I know I want to do film. I'm passionate about it. I liked this, and this that you guys put out for these reasons. And I was wondering if you were open to having a conversation, whether it's over the phone or in person, and letting me know a little bit about how you get into the industry, your story of getting into the industry, and how I might go about trying to find a job. Same thing, send like 200 emails like that in a month. I got like 50 or so responses, and these are cold emails, people I find off of LinkedIn or off of a website of a company I liked that they put out a cool music video, like a Kendrick music video that I grew up watching, whatever. And just a total shot in the dark, which is like a big part of how I've gotten a lot of my life, is you just throw something at the wall and you hope it sticks. And when you do it with hard work, like 200 emails, all to different people, not just copying and pasting, like individual personalized emails, takes a lot of time, including the research of the companies. Then send 200, get 50 or so responses, a lot of them just being like, hey, kind of busy right now, whatever, brushing you off, but like at least giving you the nicety of responding. And then you get 5 to 10, yeah, hey, nice to meet you, really short. Why don't you come up and meet us this Wednesday? And it's like, okay, I'll drive an hour and a half up there, meet with them, leads to nothing. But hey, I got the foot in the door a little bit. The experience was there. I learned something from them in the conversation. And now that they know who I am, we're connected on LinkedIn or we're connected by email, whatever, and I can continue to reach out to them. And then finally, I went to Exile and just walked in for, I didn't know it was an interview at the time, but I thought I was just meeting with one of their heads of production, of post-production, because it was an editing company, and kind of just have a conversation with her, ask her how she got in the industry, same kind of thing, informational interview. And then at a certain point, she just started asking me all questions about me and what I wanted to do. And I kind of expressed the same thing of, well, you know, I don't really know anything. I'm entry level, but I got this film degree. I know Avid, the software. I know Premiere. I would love to edit for a career. I figured that out in the past 2 years. I can spend 8 hours a day on editing software, and I open my eyes, look at the clock, and I thought 5 minutes passed, but it was 8 hours. And I say those kind of things, and they're like, okay, this kid's passionate. Clearly he has hard work, and he's willing to take a leap of faith by just finding my name on the internet and emailing me. And then it turned into an interview at some point. I met a couple people at the company, and then I walked out of there with the job. I had to be back there the next morning. Wow. So that was like the intro to getting the job. Worked there for 2 months. COVID happened. This is April or March of last year. I get laid off, as did many people in the industry. Come home, and we took it very seriously, COVID. So I was home for about 4 months. 3 months. Then I get rehired and actually promoted out of being laid off, which is kind of funny. I went from PA, which is like personal assistant, like kind of typical film industry of the guy who's going to get coffee, but it's your foot in the door. And I am willing to do that because that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be in the industry. So if I have to go get coffee for people that don't know my name, that's a step. It's like one step up the ladder. So I was totally excited about it. But then when I get out of COVID and rehired, I got promoted to like vault manager, which is basically a media management position. You get a bunch of footage from an Apple commercial, let's say, or whatever it may be. And I would be the person who gets that footage at the office, ingests it, transcodes it to whatever the editor edits on, basically gets all the footage ready for the editor, sends it to the editor, the assistant editor, the producer, etc. And it's kind of the bottom level of a spider web that the company is, because there's 30 producers, 30 editors, and you're working with all of them, whereas they're all working individually with themselves and don't really interact with the other editors and producers. So it's super, super learning job. I learned a lot. It was a great learning experience. And I started with not knowing anything about it, not knowing what the software was that I was going to use to transcode. It was all new, but it was kind of, this is what you want to do, hit the ground and start running. And I was working 60 hours a week, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. But I loved it because it felt like, hey, I'm stepping the right direction. It's grunt work, but this is what I want to do. And you got to pay your dues. So it's definitely cool.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
How does oh no, you're working this job and things are going pretty well, it sounds like. So how does somehow USC grad school and film school enter in the fray?
So like I said, film was the goal since I was young. I went to like UCLA because we're a UCLA family, funny enough. I went to UCLA film camps all of growing up. And then in high school, I went there for like 3 weeks each summer for college credit. And it was basically like film 101. You go in, you learn a lot, you watch the movies, and then by week 3, you put out your own short film with like 3 kids working with you. And you switch out positions, etc. Director, producer, editor, sound. So I grew up knowing I wanted to do that. And I left those programs thinking like, I'm going to do this. But as we talked about the other day when we were catching up, I also was influenced by my family and just thought it was the right idea. Ended up choosing Oregon, didn't apply to film school in undergrad because I wanted to get more of an education in terms of something that would help me learn about the world, aka political science, international relations, which is what I focused on. And then if I still wanted to do film, I had the education and background and worldly experience, whatever it may be, to bring into the medium of film, because you can learn how to use a camera and learn the software almost on your own if you truly wanted to and had the work ethic. But point of that question, that was all build up to it. When I got laid off, was at home every day, and I'm active, so I was biking and surfing and stuff, but I'm still at home at 23 years old, living with my parents, which is not ideal. No job. Not really hanging out with friends because everybody else is off doing their own thing, or if they're home, they're also taking COVID seriously. Right. So I was at home. Applied to SC actually without telling my parents that I was. Paid for it on my own because the plan was always, go be young and get a job and work in LA or work wherever, travel, that kind of thing for a couple of years, then go back to grad school. But I was sitting at home with nothing to do. So I was like, might as well practice on these apps. And a lot of the film school applications it's not like GPA based, or, I mean, you have to have above a 3.0 in undergrad, but it's not like getting into law school where there's LSAT or anything like that. You don't even have to take a graduate like entry level exam. It's pretty much like 3 questions, all of them being write a short story. And they just judge if you can tell a story and if you're creative and if you have a unique perspective, that kind of thing. So that took a lot of time. And I was like, this is good practice. I'll shoot in the dark again, throw something at the wall. And if it sticks, it sticks. By the time I get back to work, like a week before I get rehired and promoted out of COVID, I had already had an interview, which I never expected to have because it's a hard program to get into. And the interview went like really, really well. Pretty much when I left the conversation, I knew I was going to get in. So then it was just a waiting game. 2 months back into working, I get into SC, and that was the kind of opportunity I can't turn down. It was a dream since I was young, and I got in. So you got to go.
That's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
So you were 2015 grad, right?
Yeah.
From San Clemente. So between then and now, like everything, everywhere you've been, the experiences you've had, did you expect things to go this way as you were graduating from college, from high school? Like, did you think that like that this is what the path was going to be? What
Absolutely not.
what like explain to me kind of like where that kind of where you are with that.
Well, I kind of touched on it earlier. I was a little bit depressed only having gotten into Oregon and Boulder, and a couple of the UCs, mostly because, and this is a bit toxic in my opinion, but so many of us at that age, senior year, are just focused on the ranking of the school you want to get into. And I was a full-on athlete in high school. School wasn't my thing. I didn't get taught the things I wanted to learn, and I didn't spend time in any way really on things that would actually help what I wanted to do further on, just to kind of throw that out there. But then once I went into Oregon, it ended up being a blessing, and I put the rankings beside the point. Like, didn't want to go to a JC or whatever. I wanted to have the undergrad experience, so I went to Oregon. Then once I was actually learning about what I wanted to learn about, that being film and international relations, political science, it's a completely different world. Like, academics became my main focus. I wanted to be the kid that got the highest grade on the paper and the test, not just like as a competitive thing, but literally I wanted to prove that, oh, I find this interesting and I'm going to write as much as I need to write to prove that I know what I'm talking about, because I do. I like this. So school completely changed. Never saw that coming when I was 16 years old at all. It's hard. I wasn't a science kid at all. And in high school, you're forced to take science every year. Take chem, things like that. That wasn't me. But if you push through that with work ethic and you get into whatever school, your experience changes because you get to study what you want. And then education's a completely different thing at that point when you're learning about what you want to learn about. So never saw that part coming. And then in terms of like work experience and film and getting into SC, none of it I saw coming. It's kind of like I was saying earlier, is you take it one day at a time, you make decisions based off of what's in front of you, and then you end up where you end up. And luckily I made some good decisions, probably made some bad ones and learned from them, which are arguably just as important. But I wouldn't say it's all random. I also wouldn't say it's all predestined. But I definitely did not know the things that have happened. Like, where I am now is where I would be when I was 16. And if I could listen to where I am now and like listen to this recording, for example, when I was 16, it would have just motivated me. I would have had more work ethic in school. I would have been very excited about the future, which is hard when you're in high school and there's all these expectations. But it's been great. I like never saw it coming, and I'm excited for where I'm going to be in another 5 years.
But see, I think you bring up so many good points there. But I think what's interesting to me, my experience with you in class when you were a sophomore, was, you know, the whole thing of basically, if you can put something in front of a kid that they are intrigued by, they will wake up to that. Like, you had good grades in school. There's nothing, you know, it was, you know, but it was like when we had that project your sophomore year, you know, you did Brave New World, you did Macbeth, you did those things as well. But when we did the spoken word stuff, that was a whole, like, you were a quieter kid in that class. And then the second that we put a poem in front of you and you start writing this and whatnot, I remember hearing the story of you going down to your parents and sharing this poem, this performance poetry with them. And then you do it in front of the class, and me sitting there going, holy crap, this is a brand new kid. Yeah. Like, can you kind of walk me through the difference between a lot of the schoolwork you get, and then when you get a chance as a creative person to do a creative assignment, how was that different for you?
It's completely different. It's like, for me, it would have been a better form of education from age 5 years old until now. And that was the reason I was kind of trying to poke at a little bit in saying, once you get to college and you get to study what you want, it's fun. Education is fun. Mm-hmm. And sports was who I was growing up. So school was second. And like you said, like, I got good grades. I come from an academic family and my parents pushed us to get good grades, but I was never taught anything that was truly exciting or made me want to read Macbeth, for example.
Mhm.
There were certain books like, yeah, I loved, and I was an English kid. I liked writing, I liked reading. But even having said that, like I was never considered one of the better writers, often wasn't considered to be in the next AP class, that kind of thing. It was more so just me doing it on my own accord because I was interested in it.
Mhm.
And then once you get an assignment like that, the slam poetry that we had, it was creative. And that was the kind of thing that I had always been into. That was, I get home from school in middle school and I'm making videos out in the street with my friends, and that's creative. Some could see that as a chore or work if it's not for them, just as any assignment might be. But for me, it was all fun. So then when you get an assignment that isn't, oh, you just read Macbeth and write 1,200 words on what you think about this, this, and this. It's like, okay, that's very structured and there's no room for me to be me on the paper. But then you get an assignment that I never had all of high school, all of my education, and then continuing after that assignment and your class, never again was allowed to be creative in high school or like basic education.
Yeah.
So then once you're allowed to like kind of educate yourself in a way that's advantageous for you, education becomes fun. And that was a perfect example of, oh, I get to prove who I am on one page, sitting there with a blank page in front of you. Who are you? What are you going to write about? That's cool. And I learned more from that assignment and how I like to write, what I like to write about, than I did in any writing assignment in high school. So I love that. And that's what I would say if you're in high school now, or if I was talking to myself as a 16-year-old now, just knowing that the work you have to get through to get to that point where you get to study what you want and you get to find the ways that education can be fun for you is worth it. Like maybe in the future there'll be reform and you can learn in different ways. And it already seems like there is, with there being an IB film class in high school. Like that's crazy cool.
Yeah.
That creativity is put in front of you at 16 when it wasn't for me. But if you get through the minutia, or it might not even be minutia for you, you will get to a point where education is about what you want to learn about, or in the ways that you like to learn, because it's up to you and it's worth it. And that assignment is just like a precursor to what there can be beyond if you don't like school at the time, which I didn't.
That's rad, dude. Because I love the fact that in that class, I was always like, oh, Liam's just, yeah, he's just quiet. He turns in good work. Cool. And then the second that you took that stage in our classroom, I was just like, my mouth was agape. I was just like, this guy has so much inside of him that I would have missed out on.
Yeah.
If we hadn't had this assignment, if we couldn't make this slam happen. So yeah, I feel you, brother. Like, I think it's such a cool thing to hear. And like you said, when you get opportunities like that and you smash it, yeah, I mean, it just shows, I think, when you can wake people up and, we need more of that for sure.
Yeah.
I know you're not a 5-year guy, but based on where you've been, I mean, you cover so much ground with all this. Based on where you've been and where you seem like you're headed, do you have any goals or any idea of where you want to be in a handful of years, or are you just going to keep taking that one day at a time?
I mean, I take it one day at a time, but I definitely have aspirations. Like when I was in high school, I knew I wanted to go to college and I knew I wanted to study abroad. Both of those things happened. When I was in college, I knew that I wanted to work abroad. That happened. And when I was graduating, I knew I had a couple years to try to figure out film, or I'm going to go to law school. And I kind of got a job, figured it out, threw a shot in the dark, and got into SC for grad school. So now that's somewhat figured out. So while I don't have like 5-year plans, I do kind of have a general like, oh, this is what would be cool. And then day by day you take it and then suddenly you wake up and you're there. And I'd say now the 5-year plan, or maybe even beyond 5 years, is I know I want to work abroad again. And my experience in Laos like fully taught me the type of film I want to create or spend my life pursuing to create, that being film that educates, helps others, and tells stories, obviously, which is what the film medium is for. So if I could find my way into some sort of filmmaking within 5 years that involves international work experience say I do the same exact thing, work on something a little different, like clean water, how to clean water, purify water in a developing country that might need it. And I go do that. That would be awesome. That is definitely a goal. Working internationally on documentaries, goal. Like those Planet Earth, things like that. I've loved those since I was young. Goal. I would love to work for National Geographic or whatever company it might be. And recently, we just turned in a project at SC, so I've kind of been researching what I might want to look for internships this summer. I've been reaching out to those companies, just like I said with the internships I had in school and the jobs I had, same way, drafting emails of like, hey, how would I get into this business? I would love to go film turtles in Cape Cod. I don't even know if there is turtles in Cape Cod, but just an example.
Yeah.
So like, based off of those being like aspirations, goals, or things I would love to do, it's kind of just, okay, laying the groundwork of doing the same thing, and maybe it will happen, maybe they won't, but I do know at some point it will. And then in terms of like a longer goal, I know, like, I don't really know where I'm going to end up within the industry or if I'll end up in it at all. Because not everyone that goes to SC becomes a movie maker,
right?
Filmmaker. But I think it would be cool to have my own sort of creative outlet as my work, as a company. I know I want to travel. I know I want to help others. And I know that I like to direct. I like to be on the camera, and I love to edit. So if I can find some sort of company or creative outlet that is my job in the future, where I am allowed to do all those things, travel, edit, direct, use a camera, it'll happen. Like, that's what I want more than anything, more than being the next Spielberg or whatever. I would rather have my own little company that travels, makes important and recognizable and educational films, or tells other people's stories. Like, for example, I wrote my thesis in college on Secret War in Laos. Laos is the most bombed country in history because of the United States. And no one in the United States even knows that we did that. At the same time as fighting Vietnam, we made Laos the most bombed country in history, and none of us know. And like, my thesis was about why. And it's interesting that none of us know, because that is so much of that country's culture, or who they are today is based off of the fact that this happened to them 50 years ago. They still have unexploded ordnance all over their country that people get hurt from or die from every year. It still happens. And it's the US that did it. So their identity is wrapped in part, obviously, but a big part around this history they had with the US. And that's the kind of story that deserves to be on the screen. Yeah. Like, it's not my story, but I would love to help the Laotian people tell that story. So at some point, I don't know how I'm going to get there or what will happen, but just having that in the back of my head of like, that would be cool. And based off of my past experiences, hopefully it will happen. I think it will happen, because so far the things that I've wanted to do and had goals for end up happening, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to sound conceited or anything like that. It's kind of just day by day.
You're a self-made guy because you're willing to do the work to get to where you want to go. You've relied on nobody else but yourself. You've made your connections. You've worked your butt off to get to. So for you to have a goal like that, where you want to put that on the screen, it's going to happen because you have found a way, like you said, to will it to happen with your hard work. And that's incredible, dude. Like, that's honestly, like, it's so cool to hear from 2015 to now what has transpired since you left this area. And I'm proud of you, man. I think it's such a just a neat thing to be able to hear about, because you've set an awesome foundation for what you need to accomplish, but you've also got a lot more that you want to do. And so I think for someone that's as hungry as you are, it's going to be awesome to see where you end up.
Yeah, me too. I also just want to address really quickly, because that made me think of it. When I speak of it that like concretely, what I want to do and expecting it to happen, there's no guarantee that it will happen. But the more like I speak about them in ways that I think they will, the more likely they can. And also, I don't want to come for the sake of wherever this conversation may go. I don't want to come from a point of like, oh, look at me, I've done this, because I have no idea what I'm doing. I had no idea what I'm doing at 16. I have no idea what I'm doing now, but I know if I put in hard work towards the things that interest me each day right now, then good things will continue to happen. Things that I want to happen, like getting into SE, will continue to be greenlit based off of what I wake up and do today.
Dude, I'm 36 and I live by the same mantra and mentality. So I think that for anyone to believe that they know what they're doing, like truly know what they're doing, is you're kind of lying to yourself, you know? So I feel you. As long as you put, you put good things out there and you mean well and you work your tail off, that's all we can ever ask, all we can ever hope for. So I don't get that vibe from you at all, that like that's you're coming off in a certain way or whatever else. I get the vibe you're coming off like a guy that works his butt off for what he wants, and that's what we all should be like.